Welcome to Zooming In on Hate, where we offer some clarity on the world of online hate, one conversation at a time. From policies and strategies to the latest trends and themes, we zoom in on what really matters in making the online space safer and more transparent for everyone. My name is Jordi Nijenhuis.
And my name is Lydia El-Khoury.
And today we're digging into a big question that's on a lot of people's minds. Is the Digital Services Act actually big tech proof? Can it hold the largest platforms accountable? Or are we seeing early signs of resistance and workarounds?
Now, this episode's a little bit different because instead of Jordi and myself chatting to guests, we're bringing you highlights from a webinar that we hosted on the 25th of February 2025. And we invited two brilliant voices who work on the DSA on a daily basis from HateAid in Germany and CNAM in Ireland. That's the Irish media regulator. And they'll share insights on where the DSA stands today. For example, how enforcement is playing out and what the shifting landscape of content moderation and platform behaviour means for online safety, and in particular when it comes to hate speech and disinformation.
And this conversation was an interesting peek behind the curtains. But before we drop into that panel discussion, Lydia, can you give us a quick sense of why this conversation matters, especially right now?
Yeah, well, the DSA is gathering pace. Every month we're seeing progress. Some of the key milestones have been reached. Transparency reports have been submitted. More trusted flaggers have been appointed. For example, point of contact is just being appointed in France. It's all gathering pace across the EU. Most national coordinators are in place, but the big test we have now is enforcement. Platforms are evolving really quickly, and the question is the DSA keeping up, and will the DSA keep up with them?
Yeah, big question. And actually, one of my growing concerns is that the Digital Services Act is at risk of becoming a bit of a political tool rather than just a regulatory framework, particularly in the face of mounting pressure from outside the EU. We've already seen how influential US based big tech companies can be in shaping global digital norms. And I think right now there's a real danger that their lobbying power combined with geopolitical considerations could try to water down the DSA's intent. This law was designed to protect EU citizens and values, including safety, transparency, democratic resilience. But if enforcement becomes negotiable based on who's applying pressure, we're entering dangerous territory. When decisions start shifting based on business interests in the US or political pushback from abroad, rather than EU-based assessments of risk and harm, the DSA's credibility and effectiveness could be fundamentally undermined. And if the EU doesn't hold its ground and remain independent in its enforcement, we risk ending up with a framework that looks good on paper but fails in practice, especially when it comes to tackling online hate, disinformation, and those systemic harms that we always talk about.
Indeed. And let's remind ourselves that, exactly as you say, the DSA was designed to regulate digital platforms and services to create a safer and more transparent online environment across the EU. So the fundamental goal of it is to protect online users, combat illegal content. So we're talking about illegal content like hate speech, terrorist content, counterfeit goods, and it requires platforms to quickly remove illegal content once they've been notified that it's on the platform. And it's about protecting users from online harms such as disinformation and cyberbullying. Overall, the goal is to increase transparency, hold big tech accountable for what's happening, illegal content on their platforms, improve content moderation, and then enable better oversight. And I think the average user within the EU, and indeed further afield, would welcome these developments. Users want to be safe online and know that they can trust the platforms to be doing their best to protect them. So, understanding the intricacies of the DSA is always better with the help of experts like our two guests today. And First off, having insight into the legal perspective is essential. And with that, we'll be speaking to Katharina Goede from HateAid in Germany. And she's going to talk about the civil society perspective and enforcement challenges. And to get the regulators' perspective, we're looking forward to hearing from Alexander Cullum from the Irish Digital Service Coordinator, CNAM. So without further ado, let's hand over to Katharina Goede from HateAid and Alexander Cullum from CNAM for their insights on the current state of play.
So I would say the DSA right now is at a crossroads. On paper, still, I would say the DSA is a bold attempt to set strict standards for digital platform regulation across Europe. But right now, maybe even before, its impact in practice remains uncertain. Platforms can be held more accountable for combating harmful content and disinformation now, but the success depends largely on the effective enforcement process, which is, as we all know, also political. And yeah, this leads to, this underlines the fact that a law is only as strong as the willingness of authorities and the abilities and the processes to apply it consistently. We have also be facing political instability, political uncertainty, as already mentioned. I'm from Germany. We've had this big election on Saturday. For months, we had a minority government. A law against digital violence in Germany was announced in 2020 in the 2021 coalition agreement, but was not passed due to the government crisis. At the CSU party conference, Friedrich Merz, our most probably next chancellor, said that the overregulation must be ended and called for a return to the big issues. So these are some difficulties we face right now at the beginning of 2025. Also, we had this visit from JD Vance recently to the Munich Security Conference, which caused some confusion on how everything will develop. So yeah, it's an interesting time right now, to put it that way. And we hope that the challenges facing society as a whole will be taken seriously, and that the DSA will continue to be consistently enforced. So for now, as far as I know, the European Commission has initiated 8 formal proceedings against VLOPs, but it's still unclear how effective these oversight mechanisms are, given that so far, to my knowledge, no sanctions have yet been issued.
Yes, I would say I would agree with a lot of the comments that have been made there. I think that from my personal perspective is that the DSA is playing the long game to a certain extent. It's about processes and systems. It takes time to build a picture in this industry, and I think we kind of need to recognize that. I mean, like, to say a few words about Commission Demand, I mean, we were designated as Ireland's DSC, Digital Services Coordinator, in January last year, and we're the competent authority for supervising, ISPs established in Ireland. And of course, something particular about the Irish context with regard to the DSA is the number of so-called very large online platforms that are headquartered here. So for the 15 also very large platforms and search engines that are headquartered here, we have shared competency for supervision of these, along with the European Commission and also the Irish Consumer Protection Agency as well. And so, from my perspective within that, I mean, like, I think the last year has been a very busy year, and it's only getting busier. I mean, in terms of, I think like a lot of other DSEs across the EU have really been focused on building capacity and setting up the necessary infrastructures. So when I joined in February of last year, we'd recently morphed from the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland, as it was known then, and the Platform Supervision and Investigations team that I joined was just 15 persons or so. It's very small. And a lot of the focus was still on the traditional media side. And today, you know, our organization has more than doubled and our department has more than tripled. So, you know, a lot's been happening. We've set up new teams for the processing of complaints from within Ireland, but also across the EU. There's been a lot of external engagements with platforms trying to understand, you know, the mitigation steps that they have in place. We've also been, you know, working closely with counterparts in the European Commission, with other DSEs. You know, for example, we have spoken with, I think, more than 17 DSEs about the complaint handling processes and getting those in place. We're participating in the 8 EU board working groups, which are these, you know, pan-EU groups related to particular topics and interests. And, you know, I think at this point, you know, we're now planning for our actions in 2025. And I think going into 2025, you know, we expect to see the result of all this work, you know, to build on these foundations that were laid down last year. There's been a lot that's been going on at the European level that's been alluded to. You know, we also have had, you know, new code of conducts for online hate and disinformation. There's been, you know, investigations, I think, you know, 8 against 6 ISPs, as mentioned. There have been new features that have been, you know, paused or they've been rolled back entirely within the EU as well, which I think is important. And we've also seen an expansion of new VLOPs coming online as well. So we've had, you know, new marketplaces joining and things like that. So there's been a lot happening, but I do think that the gathering of all of this information, the setting up of all this infrastructure, the building of all these connections, that has taken time. And I think now what we want to see in 2025 is really, you know, yeah, the fruit of that work and seeing what I think this year will be a really interesting year for seeing, you know, some of the results of that work.
We also asked Katarina and Alexander what challenges they are facing when it comes to the implementation of the DSA.
I think that one of the particular challenges of this industry is that things are constantly changing and constantly evolving. There's constantly new technologies coming in, and there are new approaches, and you know, not all of them might be helpful. But I think that the first thing to acknowledge on this point is that the DSA is not prescriptive as to, you know, the terms of service that platforms choose to apply, or, you know, how they choose to address risks. It doesn't prescribe, you know, that we need more or indeed less moderation as such. You know, what it requires is that content, you know, online content is moderated well, and that, you know, the risks that are identified by the risks are identified by platforms and that they are addressed. So I think really, you know, sticking to that purpose of the DSA is providing some harmonized rules for safe, predictable, and trusted online environment. It's really interested in the systemic issues around that. And so I think, like, for our role as a regulator, for example, under the DSA, it's not to you know, dictate how specific content is moderated or things like that. It's more to determine, are their systems, are they robust enough to ensure a safe environment, you know, and obviously, you know, the DSA does, of course, require platforms to take down illegal content once they've been made aware of it, and platforms must remember, and they do, that the laws in Europe around harm, such as hate speech, for example, are much stronger than they might be, for example, in the US. The DSA requires large platforms to assess and mitigate systemic risks, you know, the spread of false information or the amplification of harmful content. And and to provide transparent and constructive solutions that address these risks. So, as many on this call will be aware, Article 34/35 requires platforms to ensure the protection of certain freedoms enshrined in the European Charter of Human Rights. And this is what the European Commission is focused on, and as a regulator, we're very much focused on ensuring that the systems are effective in certain sort of key areas. And so it's particularly around protection of minors, particularly around online hate, around protecting democracy and elections, around fraud, around terrorism. So platforms are free to adjust the processes and systems, but they must demonstrate that they are protecting user freedoms in the EU. And if they're updating their TOS, they just need to be able to show that they're effectively mitigating the risks. So I think that's our approach.
What we've seen in the last year is that the catalogue of content possibly violating terms of service is steadily increasing. And there's a shift because most people on this call will also know that there are different approaches for tackling illegal content and for tackling content which is not illegal in the member state, but violates the terms of service. For example, disinformation might not be violating a law, but will be violating the terms of service. So there's a different legal approach within the DSA. And what happens when when a platform puts more of actually illegal content in the terms of service, makes it less transparent for us to understand what's going on the platform. Because if you have to put the illegal content, for example, in the transparency reports and include it in different transparency measures, and you can overcome these measures as a platform if you just increase the terms of service catalogue. So this is something we're concerned about. And also talking about the systemic risk situation. And of course, I think what everybody has in mind when talking about the different change of content moderation approaches is Zuckerberg, and it's in his lovely video telling everybody that he'll be that he chose not to pursue fact-checking in the US anymore on the platforms from Meta. So that is obviously also very concerning thing he does, but there's not a direct violation of the DSA to announce it. It doesn't have a direct effect on us in Europe because the DSA doesn't apply to what Zuckerberg does in the US. But if he chooses to reduce the fact-checking, or if he says we're not going to do fact-checking at all within Europe, we need to see, and that's from the regulatory perspective, whether this is a systemic risk, as Alexander said, and I hope we will figure out that it's going to be a systemic risk. So there need to be at least some other measures to reduce the risks of spread of disinformation on the platforms. So this is something, those changes we need to analyze in a very profound way, and we need to keep an eye on those changes for sure.
So Jordi, that was a lot of information to process, but really, really valuable and a really important conversation to tune into. What stood out the most for you?
For me, I think it was the tension between ambition and enforcement. The DSA has the potential to reshape the digital world in the EU, but it's only as strong as its implementation, right? And right now, it seems like that puzzle is still being solved.
Yeah, and I think it's clear that regulators and civil society are working hard to hold the line, and big tech is not standing still either. Content moderation policies are shifting, but progress is being made on transparency. It seems like it's going in the right direction.
And that's exactly why we have to keep asking the tough questions like we did today. Is the DSA built to adapt? Can it stay ahead of platform change? Or will it buckle under political pressure from big tech or even non EU governments when enforcement becomes uncomfortable?
That's something that we promise to keep track of over the upcoming episodes of Zooming In on Hate. But we'd love to hear from you. What do you think? Is the DSA big tech proof, or is it just the beginning of a longer battle?
Please let us know on LinkedIn via the European Observatory of Online Hate or visit www.eooh.eu to explore our latest research and tools.
Thanks so much for listening to Zooming In on Hate. Make sure you subscribe and join us next time as we continue zooming in on the forces shaping our digital world, for better or worse.
Until next time.